And right now we have a special guest, Michael Daly, coming on the show to talk UFC. It's the fighting expert right here. Michael, glad to have you on the show.
Man, it is great to be on with you guys. The names you guys were listing off before I hopped on the show. Bronzexuals was one of the names. I mean, that
was
sounds
rude.
like a crew you guys have for an audience, but it's great to be on with you guys.
That.
Yeah, our
appreciate you
Patreons
being on
come
here.
up with a lot of creative names.
Yeah, they do. Bronzexual, man.
I like when they switch it up, though. I do like it.
I do too, but I hate that term.
Why?
Bronzexual.
You're a bronzexual.
See, but that's the thing. I'm not. I'm a LeBron fan. Does that automatically make me a bronzexual? Am I attracted to LeBron? No, I root for him.
Be honest. Like, come on, bro.
Bro, God forbid that I love LeBron because he's an unbelievable basketball player. Right, so if I defend him automatically, bronzexual, the correlation sucks.
If you're a bronzexual,
no,
you could be
it means when
asexual.
you are extremely biased.
So I'm not.
Towards
You don't
LeBron.
have to have a sexual.
You are.
I know,
you
but
could be asexual
they make it.
You know what I'm saying?
Listen,
Don't be
you're right,
so-
are
2022.
biased towards
You're right.
LeBron.
That was very close-minded to me. I apologize, but I'm not because I'm not really overly biased when it comes to LeBron. I just don't see it that way. LeBron has yet to fail me at this point in time.
Are you co-signing his statement? Like, you don't know him for the longest?
Nah,
Exactly.
Like, you don't know if he's capping right now?
I'm not capping.
I know he's capping.
What?
Like,
You kidding me right now? Dude, I've never is probably strong. Probably in a joking manner, I've defended LeBron on some shit that I probably shouldn't have. But, like,
I know you
when
have.
it comes down to 2011, it's not like I'm oblivious. I say it flat out. He folded.
Yeah.
He's the reason we lost. If I was a
well, you can't
bronze...
say never failed you then.
I mean, all players go through ups and downs, right?
I agree.
Did Jordan go 11-0? Right, he would have 11 championships in the 11 seasons he played. No, I mean, yeah, you
Went
lose.
6-0.
Shout out to him, right,
place.
in the finals because the competition he played in the West was.
So right now you
Playing
have
some
the
plumbers.
American flag on?
This is the Puerto Rican flag.
You know, United States, like,
I
that's part
understand.
of America.
I mean,
United
but
States, right?
you know, you get your own flag. Like, there's territories in the United States that still are their own.
No, every state has its own flag in the U.S. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah, I'm almost entirely sure. Yeah.
I've never seen the Jersey
But
flag.
again, Puerto Rico is not a state of the United
feel like
States of
it's like a
America.
Texas
It's a
flag.
territory.
But it
It's
says
a
on the side of the hat.
territory. Yeah.
You know, my mom went to the homeland and she
Shout
brought
out.
back some gear. You know, shout out to Mommy Velez. And yeah, she got me back a tee and a hat.
I didn't even peep the shirt. You're
yeah,
a
New Jersey
citizen.
has a flag. This the flag. Yeah, every state has a flag.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, Puerto Rico is not a state of the United States. It's a territory.
for sure.
Yeah,
But yeah,
United
had to rep
basically owns it,
the
though.
motherland.
Yeah. So, Michael, before we go on and talk about UFC 276, I just want you to give a quick introduction. I could do it, but I know that you know yourself way better than I know you. And I've known you for a while, and I know that you cover boxing, UFC, all that sort of stuff. You're a hardworking man. So just quickly introduce yourself.
My name is Michael Daly. Obviously, as you guys mentioned, it probably says on the screen somewhere here. I just graduated Seton Hall. I was a classmate of Joel's for a few years. But yeah, I cover boxing, UFC. I love covering MMA, boxing. Those are two passions of mine. So, and I'm happy to talk about it with you guys too, because there's nothing better than being able to dissect a fight a few days after, because you got to go back and watch the fights. I think that's why everyone loves a fight night, because it's this primal instinct. And when a few days later you can go back and look at that fight, I think that's why boxing and MMA, those combat sports, I wouldn't say they're my favorite, but they're up there though. Football, I think, is everyone's favorite, including mine, but MMA and boxing, those are, for me, I think that's up there. So that's a little bit of a background on
Who's your
who I
football
am.
team?
Los Angeles Rams.
Oh, must be nice.
Interesting.
Yes.
Very, very interesting, Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, when I first went to Seton Hall, I was in a group chat and everybody called me Skip Bayless because I would just spew hot takes in a group chat.
So Michael, you must be acquainted with me since I was an avid supporter of your Los Angeles Rams this past season.
I did not know that, but yeah, I love that. I love that you were big on the Rams.
Yeah, man. Day one. After the very first week, I said the Rams are going to the Super Bowl and winning the whole thing.
But it was funny because I was walking with Michael. We were like on campus. We were walking, and he thought I was just a hot take guy. And then we started talking about the Rams, and I was dissecting their entire offense. And he's like, you know what? This guy actually knows what he's talking about.
Michael, you shouldn't have let him convince you of that because he was wrong. He was wrong.
Ultimately, he was wrong. Yeah.
You know what? I got to give Joel credit, because this was, I want to say this was like September 2020, in that range. That's when I first met him, because a lot of people were ripping on Joel, and I was one of them. Joel and I would get in heated debates back and forth. or we would talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. We'd go every topic, you name it, we probably argued about. But then when we got to really talk, I was like, no, this guy knows what he's talking about. And from there, the rest is history.
Yeah, he definitely knows what he's talking about.
Sometimes.
Of course, I know ball.
Sometimes.
The only ones that are
ball.
allowed to say he doesn't is us, right? Because we actually know,
Sometimes he knows
I
ball.
know
Other
ball,
times
man.
he decides not to know ball.
Sometimes, oh God, Lord knows that's the truth. Sometimes, oof, man, this guy Joel, he knows what he's talking about. Other times, sit here and I'm scratching my head.
Let's talk about UFC 276. So recapping the 2 title fights. The first one that happened was Alexander Volkanowski versus Max Holloway. Now Volkanowski, he won all 3 fights in his trilogy. The first fight, I thought he won it. The second fight, I rewatched it. Holloway, to me, I give him the slight edge, but this third fight, I don't feel like there was any room for a decision. I feel like Volkanowski won, and I think there's an argument to be made that he's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the sport right now. I think he's on a truly dominant run. What do you think about that, Michael?
He's up there. If he's not 1, then he's 2. Maybe Kamaru Usman's ahead of him. I've even heard some people say Charles Oliveira. But this guy for sure is in the top 3. And it's because he was able to prove time and time again that first win in December 2019 against Max Holloway, that was not a fluke. A lot of people even questioned that win and were like, no, Max should have won that fight. No, Volkanovski, rightfully so, took the first one. Okay, then the second one happened almost 2 years ago to the day. I believe I was in that camp that said Max Holloway should have won a decision. He was robbed. And I was even in the crowd that said Max Holloway was the uncrowned king. But you know what, guys, would change my opinion on Alexander Volkanovski? It was his win over Brian Ortega last September. Once he beat Brian Ortega and just snatched victory from the jaws of defeat from Brian Ortega, he proved to me and to everyone else that he is the very best 145-pound fighter on planet Earth. And it just goes to show, after that win, then his win over the Korean Zombie, Max Holloway just fell back a little bit too much for a trilogy fight to win that. So it's unfortunate. It pains me because I love Max Holloway, and I'm sure you guys do too.
For sure.
But Alexander Volkanovski, he is that guy right now.
Yeah, Max Holloway he has one of the most entertaining fighting styles in the UFC right now. But I think what Volkanovski does the best when he fights him is that he neutralizes his fighting style. The first one, you could really tell that he neutralized his fighting style significantly. Like Max Holloway in the first fight landed 134 significant strikes. Holloway in his other fights after that, he had 445 significant strikes against Calvin Kattar, 290 against Brian Ortega, and 230 against Yair Rodriguez. So Volkanovski's been able to neutralize Holloway. In the second fight, Holloway only landed 102, and I thought he landed more just from like my eyes watching it. And in the third fight, he neutralized him again. Volkanovski has not lost since 2013, and now he wants to challenge himself and move up to lightweight and now be a double champion. If he does that, then I don't think there's an argument for him not being the best pound-for-pound fighter in the sport right now. Like, now that Khabib is retired, like Volkanovski, like he's even said that he's kind of getting bored with the division.
Can you blame him for being bored? I personally can't blame him because other than Max Holloway, there's no one out there right now that either one, he hasn't beaten before or is really worth a test for him. Josh Emmett is a good fighter. Yair Rodriguez is also a very good fighter as well. But are they pay-per-view sellers? No, they're not. If Volkanovski decides, you know what? Let me move up in weight and either fight Charles Oliveira or fight someone like Islam Makhachev, Khabib Nurmagomedov's underling and understudy, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Those are huge fights for him. And the thing is, taking a challenge like that, you would be fighting someone, whether it's Oliveira or Makhachev, who are at the top of the mountain in the pound-for-pound ranking. So if you're able to beat them and then hold 2 belts simultaneously, my goodness, it is hard to knock someone off. But with that being said, though, I still think Kamaru Usman is the best fighter on the planet.
Yeah.
But with 2 belts, though, in the 145-pound division, cleaning that division out, and if you're able to beat Charles Oliveira, there's not much debate.
But you look at Charles Oliveira, he has just been so technically sound in his approach, the way that he's able to submit almost every single opponent, it seems, as that's been the case. Oliveira had an unfortunate situation where he wasn't able to make weight. I think he missed it by 0.5, correct? 0.5. Mm-hmm. And even still, didn't matter. He wasn't able to have the title put around his waist, but he won the fight in convincing fashion. Oliveira has just looked so much more superior against his opponents. Holloway Volkanowski, when it comes to that matchup with Oliveira, my concern would be the size advantage. But off his most recent fight, Volkanowski with Holloway, you see how his speed and how meticulous he is. He's able to just move around the octagon so swiftly that it kind of neutralizes his opponent's height. If he wasn't as quick, if he wasn't as elusive as he is, and you see it as his fights have gone on, he's gotten progressively faster and faster, which has only benefited his fighting styles, where now if you put him against a guy like Oliveira, I just feel like Oliveira's too technical right now for me to say that if they were to fight, especially with Volkanovski having to move up, that's a whole different regimen, a whole different training that goes into it. For him to immediately go into that class and be dominant, I think it's going to take a little bit of time. There's a few guys that have come in and been able to do that. McGregor, obviously, he's been one of the most infamous double champs there is. But he, even still after that fact, he fought an opponent that he was able to dominate. He just didn't look like he was on the same level as Conor McGregor. But at this point, Charles Oliveira is not someone to overlook. This guy, as Michael already mentioned, is if not the best, the number 2 pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now. Oliveira, again, unfortunate situation where he wasn't able to make weight. However, he is that guy when it comes to submissions.
And I have a question for you, Michael, because I know there's been a bunch of debate in the UFC world. I was talking to my friend who trains about making weight and cuts, and Oliveira obviously missing it's a huge deal. You know, I feel like this has been going on for a while where you obviously have weigh in, you have to make whatever weight it is, 155, say, and then the next day or whenever, these guys have been cutting their whole life, right? They're used to losing 10, 20 pounds in a day or two, and then the next day they balloon back up and now they're 180. I know that's a big controversy in the UFC. I wanted your thoughts. Is that a problem? Do you think UFC should step in? Like, it's a health concern too? Like, then you're fighting different weights when you're actually in the octagon?
Joel, the problem here is how a state athletic commission goes about handling this, because it's not really up to the UFC. It's more so up to Nevada, California. Now, California, they have different rules than, say, Nevada does, because California, you have to be under a certain weight limit at a certain amount of time. So that way you're not being a quote unquote weight bully, or you're not cutting too much weight where it's unhealthy for the fighter. A situation like Charles Oliveira went through, although he missed weight, the scales that were used in Arizona, because that fight took place in Phoenix, those scales were accused of being off, because Charles Oliveira, when he was weighing himself before he stepped foot on the scales, the official scales, he was on weight. And other fighters actually pointed that out. And they said, no, I had the same problem where I had to go back and I had to measure myself again and check my weight. So it's hard in a situation like that where Charles Oliveira missed weight. Automatically he's scrutinized, because in the past, not only has he missed weight, but he's been accused of being a quitter. So weight issues like that can negatively impact the legacy of a fighter. But I wouldn't worry too much about Charles Oliveira. It's other fighters that will have to worry about ballooning up to 200 pounds and having to whittle down to 155. Like Paddy Pimblett, I don't know how familiar you guys are with him, but that dude, he goes up to like 200 pounds and he has to shrink back down to 155. That is tough to ask for a fighter.
Yeah, no regular human beings doing something like that.
No.
I promise you I can't do that.
That's hard. To cut that
The
much
most
weight.
I've been able to cut, and it took me months, was 25 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it's
Even
really
still,
tough.
That's hard. Like, being able to do 45 pounds, like, it's unhealthy. Like, the amount of weight you're taking on and taking off and putting on in such a short time span, it's like, it can't be good for you.
No.
Well, you have no water. That's the thing.
That
Because
is what it
essentially
is.
you're water cutting, and you're not eating, you're not drinking any water, and you're just wicking away a ton of sweat, and you're just training. And for Paddy Pimblett, it works, but as you get older, that's not the right way to balloon up and just eat a ton of food all the time.
The other title fight in the card was the Israel Adesanya and Jared Cannonier for the middleweight championship. Now, to me, I'm gonna be honest. I'm not somebody that watches UFC religiously like that. So, from a casual perspective, it was a pretty boring fight, in my opinion. I was almost taking a nap during it. But Michael, what did you see in that fight? What did you think, and what do you say to people like me who thought it was pretty boring?
It's an acquired taste, a fight like that, because if you're not someone who enjoys chess matches, because that's what that was.
Definitely.
If you want to see someone just get flatlined, that's not the fight for you.
You got to watch Max Holloway.
Yeah, you got to watch Max Holloway bleed and can barely see out of his left eye. That's a fight you got to watch. But with Cannonier, the reason why I think people like yourself were disappointed is because he has combinations that he can then turn into one-punch power. That's the way he sets up his devastating knockout shots. Unfortunately, he just ran into the guy who I deem to be the greatest striker in MMA history.
Oh, wow.
That's the way I saw it, and I wasn't proven otherwise. Israel Adesanya, the way he's able to cut angles, the way he's able to maneuver the pocket, and Jared Cannonier just made a lot of mistakes when it came to setting himself up offensively. He was what he should have been was either too far away or too close to Adesanya. He was in that intermediate range where it was hard for him to touch Adesanya because he's 5'11" and he has a 3-inch reach disadvantage against Adesanya. And Adesanya, I mean, he's 6'4", 81-inch reach or 80-inch reach. He could just sit there and just poke at Cannonier all night long. And that's what happened.
So Israel Adesanya won the fight. After he won the fight, he called out Alex Pereira and basically said that you're next. Like, he wants him next. He wants him. And the reason why is because they had fought twice already previously in kickboxing, and Alex Pereira won both times. The second time he knocked him out. So UFC is really hoping that this fight becomes something, because I think it's going to draw a lot of attention. Oh, yeah. It's going to be a lot of pay-per-view dollars. In that fight, do you think that Alex Pereira beats him for the third time, or do you think Israel is just too good right now?
You can't count out Alex Pereira. You cannot count him out. And he actually is next in line, because the UFC said whoever wins this fight, meaning Strickland Pereira, they got the next crack at the title. Little be known, it was Alex Pereira who just beat a Sean Strickland. I don't even know what his game plan was. He was parrying shots, had his guard down, and he paid the price for it. Alex Pereira can beat Israel Adesanya. He can. Right now, though, it's hard for me to pick against Izzy. It is, because one, it's a completely different sport, and two, Israel Adesanya has been so good inside the UFC. He cleaned out the middleweight division, even tried to go up for light heavyweight supremacy, to the point where the UFC said, you know what? We got to get the guy who beat him twice in kickboxing, and we got to pray that he can be the guy to take him out in a different sport. Think about how crazy that is. You're taking somebody from a different discipline, and now you're hoping that his work with Glover Teixeira and his camp in Connecticut is good enough to compete with Israel Adesanya in a multifaceted game. Now, when they fight, guys, it'll probably be a kickboxing match. And Alex Pereira is the only middleweight who can stand toe-to-toe with Israel Adesanya in kickboxing in an MMA match. But right now, though, I think Israel Adesanya is a much better fighter than he was when he suffered those 2 losses.
Yeah, I agree. And I think right now also, like, people are wishing for Israel's downfall. Like you mentioned, the UFC's trying to get Alex Pereira to come in and now beat him. Do you think the UFC doesn't want him to be champion anymore?
It's not that they don't want him to be champion, because he is the cash cow right now. Because Conor McGregor suffered a few losses. His stock is not as high as it was. Israel Adesanya, although he lost to Jan Blachowicz, he bounced back. He made up for that loss. So I don't know if it's that the UFC doesn't want him to win. What the UFC wants to happen is parity. Same thing with the NFL and the MLB. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why the NFL loves new teams each and every year making it to the Super Bowl, because it's good for business. Same with the UFC. If you can have fresh blood, same thing with Jared Cannonier. He was fresh blood. Look what happened to him. Alex Pereira, the hope is since he is fresh blood in this scenario, he could be that next star. So that's why they want parity, because although Israel Adesanya is great, if he loses to Alex Pereira, you could set up a rematch. And if Israel Adesanya wins a rematch, boom, that's a trilogy. Or you could find a way for Pereira to fight other guys. So I think it's more so a matter of just building up that next big star.
Yeah, you're right.
And to talk about the fight very briefly, Cannonier just seemed very hesitant, just because, like Mike was saying, Israel is such a precise and one of the best strikers we have in the game right now. According to Mike, the best striker in UFC history. I'm a John Jones guy, so I don't know. Maybe it's just John Jones a little bit more technical. You mentioned the height advantage. That's what John Jones also has, but I know people aren't huge John Jones fans right now, but I got to stay loyal to the guys. To digress, I believe that Cannonier just was super hesitant because of the presence that Israel holds over guys. Izzy is just so much more physically dominant than most of the fighters that he's going to go against. And again, he mentioned the 3-inch height advantage. He mentioned the reach advantage as well. And Cannonier, it got to a point where he just needed to let the hands go, and he just seemed a little bit too stagnant, seemed to play the fight a little bit too safe, where especially when you're in an opportunity that you might not have again. If you're a Cannonier, you need to go all out. You need to try your best. Even if it results in you getting knocked out, you put the pride aside. You already know that you're losing the fight. Go balls to the wall. Try and go for that knockout punch. Cannonier never ended up doing so. Izzy retains, and it was very smooth fashion. I feel like, to answer your question about do people want Izzy to lose, Izzy, these last couple fights that he's been in, it's been more technical than anything because Izzy is just so much more smarter than these guys that he's facing. He's understanding, he's reading these fighters and what they're trying to do to him. He's just toying with them. He understands that he's just got to get to the next fight. I want to be the champion. I just got to be technical. I got to be sound in my mechanics. I can do so by being very precise and patient with my approach at fighting my opponent. So, do I think that UFC wants to see him lose? I wouldn't go that far. Like Michael said, I agree with that statement. I just think that we want, like you mentioned, the Max Holloway fights. We want to see those guys that are duking it out, leaving everything in the octagon, because knockouts are what drive people to the game, right? It's a gruesome sport. We understand that as people that view the sport, but that's ultimately what excites the fans. We like to see that big punch that gets the internet buzzing. So Izzy, that's not Izzy's style as of late since his loss. 3 fights in a row that he's gone the distance, but ultimately, you can't knock the hustle. If you're getting a W, if you're the champion, you can do whatever you want. Ultimately, yeah. But why criticize it when it's working? And
definitely, being the champion makes you a bit more conservative than usual because he's trying to defend the title. He's not trying to get the title.
It's not like every champion prior has not used that same approach. I've seen John Jones go and coast to the finish line because he was a little caught off guard with what this guy was doing, but he understands that he's more smart than his opponent. So he just plays the game. He plays the match out. It's normal.
So other news that happened in the UFC is that Cowboy Cerrone retired on Saturday, and 39 years old, retired, began his MMA career in 2005, and he fought both in the lightweight and welterweight division, 54 total fights, 36 victories, 10 of which happened TKO. How do you think Cowboy Cerrone is going to be remembered, Michael?
I think he will be enshrined in the UFC Hall of Fame at some point because, look, he is the second all-time wins leader in UFC history. And actually, the all-time winningest fighter in UFC history is the guy who just beat him, Jim Miller. And just a quick aside, guys, I actually feel bad for Jim Miller because here he was celebrating this amazing accomplishment that he had just achieved against a future Hall of Famer in Cowboy Cerrone. And people kind of forgot about it because Cowboy Cerrone is such a legend that he put his gloves and his hand wraps in the octagon because he was retiring. So ultimately, Cowboy Cerrone had some tough losses at the end of his career, but the longevity that man had in his career, fighting for a world title in 2015, all the wins he had compiled to that point, 23 UFC wins, the man's a legend.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, I want to thank you, Mike, for being on the show and talking UFC with us. Definitely going to have you on again. But for this time, thank you for your time, man. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys. Awesome.